The value, I suppose, I value that I think critically. I like to think critically. I value that I encourage my students to think critically. That sometimes, and I have, though it's changing, quite a didactic approach to teaching, that it can negate that. And that collaborative online learning may be a new space or a different space and opportunity to affect critical thinking in a history class. Again, I suppose my decision to look at it from a living education theory would very much come from that people who share power, looking at the value of sharing power together as democrats rather than leaving power in the hands of a few. And very often, I suppose, our experience of teaching history in this country was these are your answers and this is what I'm teaching and this is what we expect you to know. And I'm looking at sharing some of that historical thought in class with the students and so on. In the literature review, I looked at 3 themes: critical thinking and democratic education, social software is key to students learning with technology, and collaborative online learning environments. Now, in the critical thinking and democratic education, I particularly engaged with Dewey and Freire and tried to establish values and a view of teaching and learning. And I suppose really I came back to this twice. I did an initial reading and then I came back through Margaret, I suppose, really, and looking at cognitive presence, that these forum didn't become, I had this phrase, a discussion of mutual ignorance, that there was actually some academic work going on in there, and that we could find some way of looking for cognitive presence, that there's some serious thinking happening on these fora that is useful to the students. And I also have an examination in mind as well for these students. So I was going to, in the literature review, I looked at the investigation of critical thinking in the online classroom. Social software is a key to students learning with technology, and in collaborative online learning, spoke about constructivism, Moodle, and then moderation for learning, just in the fora, trying to see how can we organise this, that we can create a sense of cognitive presence. So, I suppose we did this exercise somewhat differently maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was just said to be one big question. Now I'd have to say, there's lots of little questions, and sometimes I find an answer and there's another little question. So I see kind of chapter 4 now as lots of little pieces kind of fitting together. Now they generate other questions, but it's not one big tidal wave of where am I going. If I can deal with little pieces bit by bit. And I suppose I find it easier now than I would have maybe 4 weeks ago in trying to articulate what I'm at. Now, in terms of the research, cycle 1 was establishing Moodle in Portmarnock Community School. It didn't exist before, so within my 5th year class, we served Moodle into it. I did a lot of thinking about my own learning on the master's course here, and I suppose the most valid part of one of the most valuable parts of my own learning in DCU was my own use and interaction in the forums, and that I've brought into the first cycle. And my own students also, within 3 days of Moodle going live, they also had their own forum up and running, which is totally unplanned. So I made a decision that within Cycle 1 it would be the use of a discussion forum within Moodle. There's quizzes, there's also other things that I could have used. So that essentially was the decision that I made in Cycle 1. Cycle 2, so I was going to use these forums as a critical space. Cycle 2, 3 forums: Were the Americans right to drop the atomic bomb? Was Charles Stewart Parnell the author of his own downfall? And then what does it mean to be Irish in 2007? Now, I went back and I took the syllabus guidelines, and I was a little bit welded to those. I realise that now. I took the syllabus guidelines and tried to find phrases within the syllabus guidelines. I said, yeah, I was doing useful work here. But when I went back, I really wasn't happy that I was establishing critical thinking. I wasn't happy with that particular approach. So it was at that stage that I went back to this literature review and read about cognitive presence. And I also realised I was going to have some framework. We had nailed together whether it would be model, but model isn't right, but some framework, some attempt to analyse critical thinking that would make sense. And from the rereading, I suppose, I went back to Hatton and Smith. Now they did a lot of work with trainee teachers, and they had a model of critical thinking. They brought in Freire, Dewey, they mentioned Sean, they mentioned a lot of the people that I was comfortable, Van Manen, people that I was comfortable with, and kind of an emancipatory end to critical thinking, because some critical thinking can be very much critical thinking within boxes, but it doesn't have actually any reflection on society, whereas I wanted something that was a little bit open to the greater good, whatever that is. Anyway, so they take critical thinking through 5 steps: technical reflection, descriptive reflection, dialogic reflection, critical reflection, and contextualization of multiple viewpoints. Now, what I went back and what I did then was I went back and I investigated the first 3 forums using Hatton and Smith's framework, and it actually began to make sense. I could see cognitive presence, I could see dialogue, I could see some critical thinking. So what I decided to do then was that I actually taught the Hatton and Smith framework to my own students. Now I did this because, again, in the literature, in some place it says that if you show the students what you're at, give them some sense of metacognition, greater knowledge of where they're going, it might actually improve their, I don't like the word performance, but their engagement with you, with themselves and with the forum. So I went in and basically, first level was, look, you give me back what's in the book. The second level, you give me back information based on other reading that you've done. The third level was happening very definitely within the forums. The first 3, there was dialogic thinking, there were debating together. And there was critical thinking. The very first example I showed there from Denise was most definitely within the Hatton and Smith view. It was critical thinking. She was aware of her context now in 2007, and she was most definitely aware that really a lot of her view on Irishness was something that was created at the end of the 19th century. And then there's another level, bringing your own thinking into a new context, which really is beyond the scope of what I'm at. It would be interesting to see, is this having an effect within their English class or maybe in debating or whatever, but that's not for now. So I just, and I also taught this, when I was teaching this to them, I taught this in the context of their learning. That very often the surface learning, just to give me back what I want, that there's achievement learning, that we need so many points for our leaving cert, but really I was interested in what is called deep learning. Now just a very short little clip here, I hope, on me trying to... Okay. Deep learning. No, it's okay. I would have to say, okay, the volume isn't there, but what I'm trying to get across is that really that I taught this to them, and trying to get across my enthusiasm of bringing them forward within the forums. So at the moment then, at MAP Cycle 3, we've had 2 further forums. Now I don't necessarily like this word change, but I want to see if there is a change, if there is a development, if they have moved on after I taught this framework. And I'm also at the moment looking at their written homework, and possibly thinking there is an online survey within Moodle that I might or might not use. But something I'm looking for today is, have I enough done? I kind of need to know when I need to stop.
Okay. We stop.